Do you know the feeling of drinking too much coffee or drinking too many Red Bull energies where your whole skin gets to feel a little bit tingly and your heart is bumping? Well, I've been feeling like that the whole last 6 days.
Oh man, here we go, come on, push it, find the dip, here we go, come on, push it, find the dip.
As a trader, you have to grab your chance at the right moment. Buy low and sell as high as possible.
And then you make the net income of someone who has a master's degree in 2 hours.
What if everyone jumps into the market?
So by the time that we started talking, it made it 8,000 euros.
There is a world made up of numbers. A world where you have to be the smartest or the fastest. A world connected by radio waves and fiber optic cables. A world where you can make money if you think you know what the future holds. A world of fear and desire, where you can win or lose. I call this world Planet Finance. Wandering around Planet Finance, I arrive all the way on the other side of the globe. Although the mood is determined by prices on the market, some days are calm with hardly a ripple, while on other days you suddenly get dragged along by the current. As an individual, it seems your influence is limited here, but even on Planet Finance, there are always people who can't resist going against the stream.
The desire to be rich encourages people to be stupid. If people didn't do stupid things, then there'd be no role for me.
Fuck.
Vultures are very useful animals. They clean up the mess. On Planet Finance, so-called shortsellers are often compared to these carrion birds. They live off other people's mistakes. They win when others lose.
Most people, when they buy a stock, they buy a share for $10 and hope it goes to 100. I, instead, sell a share for $10 and I hope it goes to 0. But essentially all I'm doing is the opposite of long investing. In long investing, you're buying a share and hoping the future's a lot better. In short selling, I'm selling a share and hoping the future's a lot worse.
So our short seller is hoping the future will be worse. He profits from the fact that many retail investors are swayed by the fads of the day. After all, hope is easier to sell than the harsh reality. I wonder, what forces do you come across on Planet Finance when you sail solo, going against the emotions of the masses?
Oh fuck! Oh fuck!
I used to do tax policy and I became an expert on tax avoidance. Okay. The issue is Capitec. And having become an expert on tax avoidance, I became an expert on fraudulent accounting. And having become an expert on fraudulent accounting, I then became a short seller. That's weird. They've changed the data on us. This is the most interesting job I've ever had, because the world is full of interesting people. And yeah, I actually find psychopathic people who will steal your money interesting. Let's just double
So
check
John
that
Hempton likes psychopaths
they are.
and liars, and built his business on them. Are you a listed company? And your share price seems too good to be true? Then he sets out to find the reason why. Have your numbers been tampered with? Then he screens your company without you even noticing it.
I'm not interested in tearing down a company with good prospects. I'm interested in finding companies that are lying about their good prospects because they really have no prospects. They've changed the data. We identify more frauds than almost anybody in the world, right? We have hundreds and hundreds of them. And I'm kind of proud of the fact that several people have gone to jail as a result of frauds that I've uncovered.
How our shortseller made his very first million? To answer that question, I travel to late 1990s Flanders, when the dot-com bubble reached its peak.
Als jullie een stukje super high-tech moderne West-Vlaanderen willen zien, dan moeten jullie hier zijn in Ypres, bij Lernout Hauspie. Dit is namelijk de Flanders Language Valley.
From far away Australia, John's eye is caught by the Flemish tech company Lernout Hauspie. The big favourite among Flemish investors at the time, the pride of the nation.
Lernout Hauspie was a software company designed to be a world-beating company that beat Silicon Valley at its own game. The idea was the holy grail of speech recognition, where you could speak into a phone in one language and it would speak out of the phone in another language.
De ontwikkelingen gaan momenteel zo snel dat binnen afzienbare tijd de Babylonische spraakverwarring ongedaan gemaakt zal worden.
Fast forward 20 years. After unsuccessfully trying to sell chocolate pralines in the Philippines for years, one of Lernout Hauspie's founders is now pacing a backyard in Ypres.
Ja, we waren toen heel bekend en iedereen wou aandelen van het bedrijf. Ja. De top van de Belgische overheid stond permanent met ons op de foto's. Om het even welke gelegenheid. Toenmalig prins Philip had aandelen gekocht.
Your Royal Highness, as a humble computer, I also want to welcome you.
Lernout Hauspie built speech recognition software that could instantly translate conversations. Their technology was so advanced that even Microsoft showed interest.
Ik toon hier even de hele oorspronkelijke versie die ik destijds zelf gedemonstreerd heb in 1996 aan Bill Gates.
As Sasha awoke one morning from a lucid dream, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. He was lying on his heart, as it were armor-plated, back, and when he lifted his head a little he could see his dome-like brown belly divided into stiff arched segments, on top of which the background.
Bill Gates zei dat is de enige waarnaar ik langer dan 5 minuten wil naar luisteren. En dat is wat Bill Gates zo interessant vond en toen besliste om te investeren in ons bedrijf. $60 miljoen heeft hij toen geïnvesteerd in Microsoft.
The concept they've come up with, it's a fantastic concept and we're very pleased to be a partner with them.
Alle, ook gewone burgers in de straat, wouden toen aandelen. Dus wie vroeg gekocht had, zag op een paar jaar tijd de waarde van zijn of haar aandelen gewoon mal 10, mal 20, sommigen mal 100 gaan.
Besides wanting to profit from Lernout Hauspie's rapid growth, the shareholders are also proud of their company in the Flanders Language Valley.
It met a European need at the time because at the time we were in the middle of .com, there was all this amazing innovation coming out of America and Europe would like to play it too.
De waarde van het bedrijf was in juli 2000 was toen iets meer dan $10 miljard.
Well, I worked out that it was a spectacular fraud. I worked out that the management had a debt obligation that was due at a certain date. The cash that was meant to pay that debt obligation probably wasn't there. All of which turned out to be true. At the end, there was 100 million missing. And then I bought for about $30,000, which was a lot of money, a short-dated speculative bet that Lernout Hauspie would fail.
What does a short seller do when he goes short? It seems complicated, but in essence, he bets that the price of a share will drop. And if it does, he makes a profit. Let's say he borrows a €100 share from a pension fund and immediately resells it on the market. Then our short seller hopes that the price of the share will drop, let's say to €10, which is when he buys it back from the market. If he then returns his borrowed share to the pension fund, the price difference of €90 is his profit. But the financial press does have to pick up on the fraud, because the share price will only go down if the news reaches the rest of Planet Finance.
And from then it was a one-way trip down. And it was like this lesson that you can be right about a massive fraud and you're going to get paid immediately.
Je kan wel even stoppen aan de overkant, recht voor de ingang. Kijk, dat is hier het gebouw van de gevangenis. Maar ja, ik heb hier dus 2 maanden en een half gezeten. De gevolgen van Absurdistan. Hè. Het uiteindelijk verdict van de rechtbank was dat wij eigenlijk de omzet kunstmatig hadden opgedreven. Dat was de kern van de veroordeling.
The company made up buyers in South Korea to exaggerate sales. And as it turned out, their speech technology wasn't nearly as advanced as they had people believe.
De strafmaat was 5 jaar gevangenis, waarvan 2 jaar voorwaardelijk, 3 jaar effectief. En plots ga je van een status van verheerlijking, die wij genoten, naar een status van boeman en verduider. Want de media schuwden er zich niet voor om de zwaarste termen te gebruiken.
Eventually, the share price plummeted to 0.
Ik blijf op mijn standpunt. Dit was geen fraude. Dus daarvoor voel ik mij niet schuldig. Maar ik voel me wel moreel verschuldigd dat mensen geld kwijt zijn.
While Jo Lernout maintains his innocence, all of Flanders, including the dentist, the shop owners of Ypres, and Bill Gates, see their dreams of mountains of gold go up in smoke.
Ik denk in 10.000 in totaal die echt zijn. Wij hebben geld verloren en wij willen ons geld terug. Maar eigenlijk de grootste woede was emotioneel. Mensen zeiden, we voelen ons belogen. We dachten dat jullie zoveel in huis hadden en dat jullie de juiste visie hadden. En blijkbaar was het allemaal fraude.
Zijn het verbrand, bezig? Bezig toch niet? Nee? Dat het verbrand hebben. Nu als ze nog een keer aangehouden zijn.
1 in 6 people, adults in Flanders, bought shares in Lernout Hauspie. They bought them on fictional stories and they lost their money. There are people who have been duped by phony religions or cults, and they always want to blame the person that points it out. If they want to blame short sellers at the end, that absolves them from their own responsibility for having been duped.
Whether the shareholders blame the short seller or the fraudulent entrepreneurs, they simply want to be recompensed.
Dit zijn de papieren kopieën, Lernout Hauspie. Zover je kan zien, allemaal Lernout Hauspie.
20 years after the company went defunct, all these duped shareholders, mainly small Flemish investors, are still trying to get even with Jo Lernout and his fellow founder, Paul Hauspie.
Ik zag mensen die werkelijk heel hard hadden moeten werken om €15.000 opzij te zetten, door niet op reis te gaan, niet op restaurant te gaan en dan uiteindelijk een kleine spaarsom te hebben. Ik heb ook zelfmoorden geweten, door de zaak Lernout Hauspie.
Indrukwekkend, hè?
De psychologie van een slachtoffer van een financieel misdrijf is complex. Die mensen die hebben dubbele gevoelens, die hebben haatgevoelens natuurlijk, omdat ze hun geld kwijt zijn. Maar ze hebben ook vaak schuldgevoelens. Ten onrechte, hè? Ten onrechte.
For the disappointed shareholders, it remains a hard pill to swallow that part of what led to their downfall was their own naivety, greed, and nationalism. For the years of trials that follow, they need an army of lawyers to support them.
Lernout Hauspie was een vrij spectaculair proces. En bij de eerste procesdag stonden alle camera's daar opgesteld en kwamen Jo Lernout en Paul Hauspie een beetje als filmsterren op de rode loper, maar dan in een cynische versie, laat ons zeggen. Ik vertegenwoordigde dus samen met mijn team een groep van rond de 2000 aandeelhouders. En een van die mensen was aanwezig in de zaal. En net voor het proces begon, kwam die naar voren en die kwam die geluk wensen. Dat is mij bijgebleven omdat het haak staat op de realiteit natuurlijk. Iemand die zo zwaar getroffen is, waarom zou je de daders die vervolgd worden, laten veroordeeld zijn, waarom zou je die geluk gaan toewensen? Financiële criminaliteit wordt door brede lagen van de bevolking niet echt als criminaliteit ervaren. Een soort Stockholm-syndroom, laat ons zeggen. Op den duur gaat men sympathie hebben voor de mensen die eigenlijk misdrijven hebben gepleegd en waarvan men het slachtoffer is.
I've never met a fraudster I don't like. It's a really strange phenomenon. They are unbelievably charming. Almost every fraudster is just a lovely guy. Right? They'll steal your money.
Ik ken een nieuwe rol. Ik ben acteur geworden. Nu ga ik geld verdienen.
Ik heb Jo leren kennen als heel klein bedrijfje, waar er nog niet veel sprake van was.
Dat is toevallig, hè? Amigo.
Jo Lernout kwam hier wekelijks 3-4 keer over de vloer. Met alle soorten mensen van alle nationaliteiten. Dus voor ons was dat ook een gouden periode natuurlijk.
Oh, excuseer. Chablis.
Ja, ik herinner me nog.
Dat is een nieuwe heet dat ik dan nog dronken. Hè?
Chablis, ja, dat is een goeie.
Jo, op het weerzien.
Ja, dat is vrede. Ze geloven dat dat vrede deugd is.
Dat zou wel zijn. We hebben een schwane jaren gekend, joh, moet eerlijk zijn.
Dat is fantastisch, hè? Ja.
Het zijn natuurlijk wel mensen die kwaad zijn en verder, ik weet niet.
Ja, ik vind de nipperen nog niet te veel eigenlijk, hè? Wel, het zal er altijd wel zijn. Wij hadden ongeveer voor de 15.000 à 20.000 euro aandeel in totaal. Ja, dat kwijt zit buiten Jurgen die gecashed heeft.
Maar mijn aandeel is in Maarten gegaan.
Ah, fantastisch.
Ja, Maarten. Ja. En ik heb eigenlijk verkocht in het jaar eind 98, 99. Ja. En hoe is het? Ja. Dus voor mij zijn de goede geweest. Nee, maar het probleem was ook wel...
Ja, oké, ja, ik ben misschien wel meld, ja, ik ben wel een beetje geld kwijt, ik ben meld, maar pas op, want Jo is van heel rijk naar heel arm, hè, want we doen ook verhalen dat hij rijk is en dan kan u verzekeren, hij is niet rijk. Dus ja, voor hem moet dat toch ook wel zeer zwaar omdragen zijn, een van de rijkste van de wereld geweest zijn en nu in armoede moeten leven.
In een week of wat.
After already having served a prison term, and after 20 years of trials, Jo Lernout is also sentenced to pay €655 million in damages. But there is nothing to be got from Jo. He even has to be treated to his muscles and Chablis. And our short seller? He made a fortune.
I thought, oh, goody, I can find frauds. I can probably hand some of the information over to the regulator and people will go to prison for ripping people off. I was very smart. I got it completely down pat and I made a lot of money. And I thought, oh, this is a good job. The worst thing that can ever happen to you in life is you walk past a poker machine and the first time you put $1 in the poker machine, you win the jackpot and you take home $2,000. That's the absolute worst thing that can ever happen to you in your life because now you're going to think, that the poker machine is an easy game and it's fun. And you really don't want to think that, because it's not an easy game and it's not fun and you're going to lose.
On Planet Finance, there is a fundamental difference between being right and being proved right. With Lernout Hauspie, our short seller was proved right, but that's surely not always the case. Sometimes the whole world seems to turn against you.
My question's, what the hell are they saying to the regulators that's different now?
There are probably a few hundred people that short sell on any scale at all, meaning more than a few $1 million worth. But the number of people that short sell within our pool trying to find criminals, probably numbers 50 or 60. And the number of people that do it on a global basis and on the scale that we do it, numbers a few, right? We are really fleas on the edge of a vast financial market. No offence to my friends, because some of these people are my friends, but most of them are weirdos. It's the least communal sort of activity I've ever seen.
Still, as a short seller, you're not always on your own. Sometimes you even get help from a colleague across the globe.
There was a very good champion boxer who was nicknamed the Dark Destroyer, and a journalist began calling me the Dark Destroyer. Quite why, I'm not entirely sure, because I'm certainly not dark, and I don't seek to destroy things, but that stuck.
Short sellers investigate listed companies. Companies that are spurred on by their shareholders to present even more positive numbers each quarter.
The biggest frauds in Europe in the last 30 years were Lernout Hauspie and Wirecard.
Wirecard ist ein Unternehmen, das sich auf Online-Bezahldienste spezialisiert hat, und es ist derzeit mehr wert als die Deutsche Bank, das größte deutsche Geldhaus wohlgemerkt.
After the Flemish had Lernout Hauspie, now all of Germany is proud of the success story of their very own fintech company.
Damit schafft Wirecard heute vermutlich den Sprung in den DAX, also in die Liga der 30 wichtigsten deutschen Unternehmen.
Germans buy Wirecard shares en masse.
Wirecard was a credit card processing company. Credit card processing is not normally a very profitable business.
For our short sellers, that hype is the first red flag.
I started looking at Wirecard in late 2015. There was a significant wobble or movement in the share price in 2010.
When our short sellers investigate further, they discover that on March 30th, 2010, there was a sudden, inexplicable dip in the Wirecard share price.
So you think, well, that's quite interesting. What's prompted that significant move? And what became apparent was that there was a criminal investigation performed by the US Secret Service. And they investigated a money runner for gambling companies. And what was fascinating was that not only was the money coming from Wirecard Bank, but it was always transmitted through another company, and that company was a company called Blue Tool Limited. Where's this company based? Mr. Google, enter the address. Some sort of mastermind is responsible for sending millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, of gambling-related monies over to this red brick house in Consett County, Durham. This is crazy. I mean, how can this be?
Meanwhile, in Sydney, John Hempton receives a tip that eventually leads him to illegal activities in the Philippines.
The first thing that we discovered that they did was what are called high-risk payments. The classic high-risk payment is pornography. If you're selling pornography online, because the margins are so fat, it doesn't matter that you might pay 5% to get your credit cards processed. If you're doing high-risk payments in the Philippines, it's almost certain that you're doing some child abuse material. And because no ordinary bank will process a credit card in the Philippines for a pornographer, you can charge 25% for that. And the usual explanation as to why Wirecard was so profitable was that it did high-risk payments that no one else would process.
And then they were also discovered to be fronts for all sorts of different companies, like whether it was gambling companies, pornographic companies. I'm just seeing where the trail goes, essentially, and I'm making notes and filling in spreadsheets as to all these companies. What you end up with is this. This tells you flows of money, ownership of companies, and as you can see at the heart of it, you've got Wirecard.
So we shorted a little bit, the usual little bit that we're working on average, the sort of rule of averages. And the stock went up on us. In fact, then it went up a little bit more, and then it went up a little bit more. And the lie got bigger.
And to expose the lie and make the share price drop, our short sellers pass on their research to the Financial Times. Wirecard denies everything and even strikes back. They accuse the short sellers and journalists of market manipulation. What happens next seems to come straight from a spy thriller story.
They used the former head of Libyan intelligence as Secret Service to manage quite a large surveillance operation against who they thought were the chief critics who were a threat to them, to Wirecard. I had vehicles parked outside my house. I was being followed everywhere I went. They would film me. I didn't know what their intentions were, whether it was to bundle me into the back of the car and I'd never be seen again. Obviously, my wife was traumatised with the school because we didn't know their motivations. We had to request passwords to collect our children from the school. The police, they took it so seriously that they put our home line, telephone line, on rapid response. So if we dialed the police, 999, and even if we hung up, they'd send a police car around. Yeah, it was horrifying, and it lasted, I think, on and off for the next 3 years or so.
And the stock just continued going up and up and up.
Remember? On Planet Finance, being right doesn't always mean being proved right. The German financial regulator, the large shareholders, even the German Chancellor, who lobbies for Wirecard in China, all stand by Wirecard as one woman, despite the many allegations.
When we first found Wirecard and were sure that it was a fraud, the stock was €9. Several years later, the stock was €191. And in that time, billions of dollars of German pension money had been used to buy the stock from fraudsters on the market.
Timing is everything. To make a profit, the Wirecard share price has to go down. But now that it's going up, John has two options: pay a higher deposit to the lender of the shares, or cut his losses and buy the shares back for a much higher price. On Planet Finance, this is called the short squeeze, as you are literally being squeezed dry.
And the second thing we found was what we thought was Russian mafia. And once you found something that we think was Russian mafia, you don't look any further, because the last thing I want to do as an individual is upset the Russian mafia. That's a good way of not living very long. It turns out that Wirecard wasn't Russian mafia, it was the Russian state, and they were using the access to the German banking system to launder money to get around, say, the American sanctions on certain Russian individuals.
It became apparent that in the market, very few cared. I mean, it became a parody in that the more accusations that were levied against the company, somehow they still had retained the ability to deflect those, and it became sort of perceived as invincible, really.
The government of Germany was extremely encouraging of Wirecard, and people wanted to believe because they wanted to believe, fill that need.
It's not going to go. It really isn't going to go.
So Wirecard was this sort of situation where we were absolutely right and we were destined to lose money.
Can you not feel my misery all the time?
In the end, John is proved right, but too late.
Die Staatsanwaltschaft München I hat heute früh aufgrund bereits beantragter Haftbefehle weitere Beschuldigte in Sachen Wirecard festgenommen, des gewerbsmäßigen Bandenbetruges, der Untreue, der unrichtigen Darstellung, der Marktmanipulation in mehreren Fällen.
The Wirecard share price plummets. On Planet Finance, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Matthew Earle had timed his short position well, and he made, in his own words, a substantial amount, which he prefers not to share with me. John Hempton's timing, however, was a bit less well chosen.
If you fulfill an emotional need and you allow a person to think that they're going to get rich, then you've got this sort of Lollapalooza effect where all of their sort of emotional needs are met at once. From my perspective, Wirecard is a failure. In fact, it's the biggest loser in the history of my firm. I just wish I'd never heard of the company. I really dislike them.
John Hempton lost tens of millions of euros. To him, Wirecard is another example of emotion being able to inflate the value of a share in the form of naivety, greed, or nationalism. Apparently, it's very complicated to estimate how precisely those emotions affect the price of a share. But how complicated? That becomes clear at the start of the pandemic.
As those worries and those fears, no one really knows what's going to happen with the coronavirus as far as economies and businesses go.
Initially, the first lockdown causes the global financial markets to crash. But soon, the share prices on Planet Finance are skyrocketing again. And because millions of people around the world are housebound, bored, and have money to spend, they jump into the market in droves. They also want a piece of the pie.
Oh.
This is one of those new day traders, Vincent Stuck. Just like the rest of the world, this student of economics is forced to stay home. Stuck in his student house, he gets lucky with a Tesla share.
Ich bin nur Amateur-Trader.
With a simple click on the button of his trading app, all of Planet Finance is at his fingertips.
Keine Ahnung, man hat Glück, dann verkauft man wieder, freut sich und dann kauft man sich irgendwelchen Schwachsinn, dann setzt man wieder Geld rein, man hat auf einmal wieder Glück und dann denkt man sich auch, das kann ja nicht wahr sein. So. Und dann im Januar kommt dann die ganze Sache mit GameStop und man hat wieder Glück und denkt sich so, das ist ja bescheuert.
GameStop. Vincent hears about that share, a chain of video game stores, on the internet forum Wall Street Bets. That's where the new generation of traders meets, and where a dislike of hedge funds with large short positions arises.
Shortsellern werden ja wahrscheinlich negativ gesehen, weil wenn man an solche Personen denkt, hat man ja ein bestimmtes Bild vor Augen. Da hat man vielleicht jemanden mit einem teuren Anzug, mit Gucci-Slippers und irgendwie eine Rolex am Arm, der jetzt irgendwie da Geld für reiche Menschen anlegt und versucht, sich daran zu bereichern, dass andere Unternehmen pleite gehen. Man geht eine Wette ein. Und ich wette darauf, dass was auch immer hochgeht, die wetten, dass es halt runtergeht. Und es kann ja nur einer gewinnen quasi.
And this is Josh. He too is new to the market, and he too joins the fight against the short sellers. But how can a chain of video game stores be the stake of such a fight?
It was just like in the midst of like very dark and seemingly horrendous dystopian end days, you know, everyone's locked inside, there's people dying and pandemic and all that stuff, and all of a sudden this thing comes up. It's like, well, so we can have some fun and buy a few stocks each, and we're going to bankrupt some hedge funds. Man, these are ridiculously cheap. Let's go for a throwback to some of my gaming from a kid.
GameStop is not the sort of thing I'm interested in. But I don't understand why retail investors are interested in GameStop either. I mean, this is a company that sells DVDs with video games on them. I mean, I play the odd video game, every one of them gets downloaded, right? The idea of selling DVDs at all feels like 10 years ago. And what you should normally be trying to do is invest in tomorrow.
Invest in the future. That's John's advice. But I wonder if he fully grasps the extent of the anti-Wall Street sentiment among this new generation of traders, and how this generation wants to try to beat Planet Finance with its own mechanisms.
This whole movement started on Wall Street bets, and they were targeting companies that sold short. The Wall Street bets, like supposed members on Reddit, like swelled to about, I think it was 13 million people on there. That's a lot of money that can be thrown around. You know what I mean? They may all just be individuals, but they're competing with a hedge fund as a collective. Julian, welcome to the show. It's exciting to get to talk to you.
How can you make the Planet Finance mechanism work for you? The Wall Street bettors buy GameStop shares en masse, which makes the price go up, while the short sellers actually speculate on the price going down. The rebels then hold on to those shares for as long as possible. Hold the line. Because that's how you can squeeze the short sellers. Remember? The short squeeze.
Also das war noch ganz normales Gefühl. Da waren Aktien drin, mal gucken, was passiert. Hier war Champagnerflasche aufmachen, die den ganzen Abend feiern. Dann war hier schon mal schlechte Laune. Dann war hier Kaffeemaschine, Motorrad, Mountainbike. Das ist alles hier.
I was like, yeah, sign me up. He's like, well, so we're going to have some fun, make some money, and take down some hedge funds. Well, where do I pay? Like, I find it fascinating how we've moved from like joke to meme to idea to theory to what's actually happening. It's like such a cool like thing to witness, like the evolution of this idea. I've spent my entire like adult life growing up in the shadow of the crash of 2008. Everything has been in the shadow of that because it was so huge. I mean, it kind of wrecked the economy for quite a while.
We are the 99%. We're awake now.
We know what it's like to be poor and broke. We're all very aware that like things aren't getting better and more prosperous in the way they had for a few generations. The gap between like the rich and poor it just continues to grow, and that's what I mean by the shadow. Because normally, what you would like when you got a big crisis like that in previous eras of human history, we would have said, okay, how did we end up with this problem? Let's do something about it. Let's punish the people who were responsible. Let's make some really ironclad laws to make sure it doesn't happen again. And let's like correct the system a little bit, like push it back in the good direction.
What has taken us by surprise is just the scale and vehemence of the current mania, retail mania. It's just bigger and nastier from our perspective than we've ever seen. If you're going to appeal to their needs, you're going to find people who feel downtrodden, who feel that life has dealt them poorly, right? And they're very good to whip into a frenzy.
Whether holding on to the GameStop share is driven by ideology or by sheer boredom, the new generation of traders tries to squeeze the major short sellers by artificially keeping the price high. And their plan works. Initially, at least.
In the meantime, a video game retailer, GameStop.
Right. It's like a David versus Goliath story. It's almost like a populist trader uprising to support the stock and really hurting the big guys. So it's just been this interesting revolt that somebody's making a lot of money on, someone is not.
If you think that there's one thing called Wall Street bets, you're wrong. Right? It's a giant poker table with 9 million people that look at it and subscribe, and tens or hundreds of thousands of people who post. And in that hundreds of thousands of people are an enormous number of sharks, tens of thousands of them. Right? Almost every scumbag we know in financial markets in the world is on Wall Street bets. And why wouldn't they be? Right? That's where millions of people are now taking their financial advice.
Nevertheless, for a number of hedge funds with large short positions in the GameStop share, things are getting harder and harder. But as it turns out, for the new generation of traders, it's not always easy to play this game on the market either. Because how long will they manage to hold on to their shares? Hold the line.
Ich glaube, in der Zeit saß ich einfach nur vom Computer, saß an meinem Handy, habe telefoniert, habe darüber irgendwie nur nachgedacht und war bestimmt 8 Stunden, 9 Stunden nur am Handy. Was ja aber auch schwerste Arbeit war, weil man die ganze Zeit am Schwitzen war. Ich habe gefühlt gestunken, dieses Zimmer muss einen Gestank angenommen haben, weil man ja die ganze Zeit da sitzt und so nervös ist. Ich habe wieder Herzrhythmusstörungen bekommen, das hatte ich als Kind früher ein bisschen und das ist dann nochmal mehr geworden. Das macht einen psychologisch ja komplett fertig. Also man ist komplett unter Stress.
But a lot of the people on Wall Street bets should be remembering the old adage, which is if you're playing poker with a whole lot of rich people, you know, a whole lot of people who are used to playing poker, and you look around and you don't know who the patsy is, then you're probably the patsy. The patsy is the dummy on the poker table who's not very good at it and is going to lose all their money.
The plan by the new generation of traders is partly successful. A number of major short sellers lose billions, and some even go bankrupt.
Yeah. And then a whole bunch of like CEOs and billionaires and hedge fund managers were like on CNBC like crying that they'd lost like their hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, won't somebody please think of the billionaires? Like it was so ridiculous.
Yet, in the end, the rebels show less solidarity than expected. When you try to play the game on Planet Finance, it proves hard to hold on to your ideals. Eventually, Vincent also takes the money and runs when he decides to sell part of his shares.
Runtergehen, das war einfach ein Scheißgefühl. Da guckt man jeden Tag aufs Handy und guckt die ganze Zeit und denkt wieder, dass es hochgeht. Wann kommt das nächste Mal wieder hoch? Wann geht's wieder hoch? Wann geht's wieder hoch? Und es geht immer weiter runter, immer weiter runter, immer weiter runter. Und dann habe ich da irgendwann noch mal ein bisschen was verkauft.
And our short seller? He thought twice and didn't go short on GameStop.
It was a demonstration of the mania of the crowd at the moment and how easy it was using social media to whip the crowd into a frenzy. Why is it possible to whip any crowd into a frenzy? You appeal to their prejudices, you appeal to their needs, and sometimes the crowd will come with you. You know, here's your opportunity to get back at all these rich people. There's been anti-short seller rhetoric for 400 years, and most of the people doing anti-short seller rhetoric are crooks. This was the first time I'd ever seen millions of people believe anti-short seller rhetoric. Crowds are dangerous. Crowds on the other side of the planet are less dangerous. I'm glad there's a long way between me and the crowd at the moment.
And with John Hempton's sigh of relief, I've almost reached the end of my journey around Planet Finance. What has it brought me? I managed to get closer. Here and there, I was allowed to peek behind the glass facade. Planet Finance is a complex world, but less abstract than I thought.
A shortcoming of a lot of traders is they ask what I consider to be the weakest question in the hierarchy of questions when you're an investor, which is why, as opposed to what. What is the strongest question you can ask?
So you are a what person?
I'm a what person, yes. Why comes later. Why is a hobby? Why is fun for me? But what is what I do for a living?
My journey started with the question, how could the market get so detached from reality? I thought Planet Finance was a world made up of numbers, where you have to be the smartest or the fastest, where you can make money if you think you know what the future holds. But actually, Planet Finance is all about emotion.
What?
Fear and desire are expressed in a graph. And what surprised me most was that risk is the essential commodity of Planet Finance. Risk is a product that can be traded.
It's like never waste a disaster, almost. And I don't want that to be taken the wrong way. I don't want to say capitalize on a humanitarian crisis or something. But during these times of dislocations, markets do move.
I mean, that's the nature of the beast. And so that wasn't something that, that resonated with me enough to stay there.
Now that the risks keep piling up, some traders feel that things are starting to go too far.
We create money out of pieces of paper, worthless pieces of paper, worthless. You know, it's just a construct so that, you know, people can make money. We use these markets so they're going to assign value to things that we really don't have any idea of what their values are. And that happens a lot. But what also happens a lot is the other thing where, you know, the monster in the machine sort of gets away from the purpose that it was created for.
The monster in the machine. According to Planet Finance, we are living in the biggest bubble ever.
The market is, at the moment, the biggest casino I have ever seen in my life. And it's more dominated by the casino function than any other time I've seen in my life. It's a bad allocation system for resources. It's not doing the societal jobs that it's meant to do, but it's a great casino. Right? The best casino that humans have ever invented.
In the end, this casino is about all of us. There is no us and them. We all live on Planet Finance. You often hear people say, leave it to the market. But what kind of planet are we living on if no one is interested in the why? but only in the what. Because, after all, that's the nature of planet finance.